Hi, you're watching Reddit Shikstore, and if you're looking for a story that doesn't start with butterflies in your stomach and a happy ending, you've come to the right place. My name is Elias. For 25 years, I was a master chromatographer for a boutique winery in Napa Valley. My work wasn't about tasting notes or oak barrels, it was about molecular truth. I used high-performance liquid chromatography to map the exact chemical fingerprint of every grape, every vintage. I could detect a hint of herbicide drift from a neighboring farm at 5 parts per billion. I could prove a $500 bottle of Cabernet was blended with cheap Merlot from 2 counties over. My tools were mass spectrometers and a fanatical respect for purity. I didn't create wine, I was its biographer, writing the unvarnished story of its origins in peaks and valleys on a graph. I was a ghost in the cellar, the guardian of authenticity. My wife, Sofia, was the winery's director of hospitality and public relations. She was the sun to my shadow. Where I dealt in micrograms and phenolic compounds, she dealt in romance, in narrative. She could take my dry analysis of a high malic acid content and spin it into a poetic tale of brisk, morning-kissed grapes from the North Slope. She sold an experience. I verified its bones. We were a perfect partnership. The scientist and the storyteller. The infection entered our vineyard with a new strain. His name was Julian Croft. He was a terroir influencer and digital sommelier, hired as a consultant to disrupt our ancient narrative. He had a silver-tongued podcast, a uniform of artisanal denim, and the practiced, searching gaze of a man who believes his own myth. He wanted to tokenize our barrels as NFTs and create VR vineyard tours. He called soil composition the original blockchain. I observed the adulteration. Sofia's language, once lush with genuine affection for the land, began to ferment into his jargon. Liquidity of taste, democratizing tannins, the mouthfeel metaverse. Their brand alignment sessions in the tasting room bled into private vineyard walks that lasted long after sunset. The familiar, comforting scent of her skin, crushed grape must, oak, and our own home, was displaced by the cloying, synthetic notes of his bespoke bergamot and vetiver cologne. A compound, my nose told me, worth less than the bottle it came in. The confirmation came through my own methodology. A contaminated sample. Sofia had used my office laptop to order a gift for her mother. In the open tabs, next to the florist, was a search. Vineyard symbolism in Renaissance art plus sacred union. It was a quest for a metaphor. She was trying to baptize their cheap affair in the holy water of art history, to give it the weight of a timeless masterpiece. The betrayal wasn't in the act itself, but in the desperate, aesthetic forgery of it. She was attempting to create a false provenance. In my world, that is the only true sin. The pain was not a bottle shattered against a wall. It was the slow, sickening realization that the entire vintage was corked. A chromatographer does not rage at a spoiled sample. He isolates the contaminant, traces it to its source, and designs a protocol for its elimination. Their affair was a bad blend. She was providing him access to the legacy, the rooted authenticity of our world. He was providing the saccharine thrill of turning sacred craft into a vapid trend. My correction would be a 3-phase analysis. A clinical audit of 2 fraudulent profiles. Julian's currency was his impeccable taste, his unassailable palate. I began a provenance check on the man. Before his digital ascension, had authored a self-published ebook, The Soul in the Soil. A Drinker's Guide to Authenticity. It was cited by tech blogs. Using my network of academic researchers and librarians, I obtained a copy. Its central thesis, that volcanic soil imparts a nervous energy detectable only by empathetic tasting, was suspicious. I ran its text through plagiarism software I used to compare wine reviews. The matches were damning. Whole passages were lifted, uncredited, from the out-of-print memoirs of a legendary, reclusive vintner named Auguste Valois, a man who'd retreated from the world after a scandal in the 80s. I didn't send an angry email. I orchestrated a resurrection. I found Valois, now a bitter hermit in Provence. Through a series of anonymous intermediaries and a generous research grant, I funded the republication of his memoirs with a foreword by a famous critic, framing him as a misunderstood genius. The launch created a small tidal wave in wine literature. Soon, sharp-eyed readers on niche forums began posting side-by-side comparisons. Croft's brilliant insight versus Valois' 1982 journal. The whisper became a shout. Julian Croft is a literary fraud. His foundation, original thought, was revealed as stolen valor. Sofia's power was her curated perfection, her flawless hosting. I needed to see the subtle instability. My administrative access to the winery's exclusive client database, a system ID helped encrypt, was key. For 3 of her most important clients, I made infinitesimal, corrosive edits. For a billionaire collector, the birth year in his profile was off by 1 digit. For a famous chef, her documented allergy was shifted from shellfish to gluten. For a Japanese import magnate, his preferred contact method was changed from email to a rarely checked office fax number. Then, I engineered a benign administrative query. From a spoofed email account mimicking a new assistant at a top restaurant group, I sent a note to our coup. Prepping for the Heitzman party and cross-referencing VIP files. Noting a few small discrepancies in the profiles for clients Stone, Alder, and Tanaka that Sofia manages. Want to ensure perfect harmony on our end. Can you advise? In a business where the only product is personalized luxury, such a note was not an error, it was a heresy. A hairline crack appeared in her reputation for flawless detail. Their collaborative magnum opus was the Sensory Canon, a $100,000 per person experience where an AI, trained on my chemical data and his tasting notes, would create a personalized symphony of aromas and sounds to match a guest's emotional palette. Its core algorithm was fed by my lifetime of chromatograms. A week before the unveiling for our top investors, I accessed the training matrix. I didn't corrupt it. I clarified it. I input a secondary data layer. The chemical signatures of flaws. The musty taint of TCA cork taint. The volatile acidity of vinegar. The bitter greenness of underripe stems. At the grand demonstration, Julian, with Sofia glowing beside him, had the AI analyze an investor's personality quiz. Behold, he announced, the Canon will now craft a unique sensory landscape for Michael, who values bold innovation. The lights dimmed. A scent diffused. Not the promised dark cherry and vanilla, but the unmistakable, wet cardboard stench of a corked wine. The accompanying soundscape wasn't a symphony, it was a recording of a barrel leaking, a slow, rhythmic drip 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 into a puddle. The room, filled with people who spent fortunes avoiding such flaws, froze. A master sommelier from France, our guest of honor, stood, his face a mask of horror. This is not innovation, he spat. This is an olfactory insult. Are you mocking the very faults we dedicate our lives to eradicate? The room iced over. Sofia's narrative of disruptive sensory exploration was exposed as a gimmick that misunderstood the fundamental pursuit of quality. Julian's tech was revealed as a party trick that couldn't tell brilliance from blight. The board convened in the owner's private cellar, a room whose security and climate systems I maintained. As they panicked, I provided my expert consultation. I played 2 audio clips. The first, from a hidden recorder in the tasting room months prior. Julian, drunk, slurring, terroir is a marketing scam for people who need to believe dirt has a soul. The second, a spliced fragment from Sofia's old voicemails, that the story is the only thing they're buying, the science just makes it sound true. The board heard not a personal betrayal of me, but a profound betrayal of the craft they owned. Julian Croft was dismissed for ethical bankruptcy and misrepresentation. Sofia was offered a choice. A forensic audit of every client interaction and the Sensory Canon budget, or an immediate, quiet severance. She resigned. She sits now on the veranda of the house I built, overlooking the vines. She is a preserved specimen in a controlled environment. The woman who sold sunsets and stories now just watches the real ones, silent. She believed she was a victim of a con man and a spineless board. She looks to me, her steady husband who understands that all things eventually break down, for solace. They loved the romance of the vine, she murmurs, until they smelled the rot. I pour her a glass of water. No, my love, I say, my voice as quiet as the hum of a centrifuge. They loved the label. I conducted the lab test. And I did. I didn't create the flaw. I merely subjected their blend to the proper analytical conditions. The results were inevitable. Now, I maintain the perfect, stable climate of our life together. The variables are controlled. The process is complete. And the silence is so absolute, so sterile, that you can finally hear the only truth that remains. The sound of a complex, vibrant fermentation, now halted forever, its final chemical signature reading only one thing. Static.